Last week, on Friday, we were in the middle of Senate File 181. We'd taken public testimony and we were working the bill. I thought I'd let the sponsor remind us where we are at this point. So, Mr. Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Pleasure to be with you again this morning. So, Barry Craigle, Senate District 22. Just when we ended up last week on Friday, Mr. Chairman, obviously we had moved the bill. You all were looking at amendments within the bill. Obviously, the bill pertains to eminent domain for energy collection systems, wind and solar. And that, it really creates essentially a threshold before you can use the power of eminent domain that's mentioned in our Constitution. And that threshold is 85% of the land mass or 85% of the owners. And as it's written right now, if there are less than 3 owners. I know there was a lot of conversation, and I know Senator Boner had some really good points on that. And I think that's one of the issues we probably need to address or talk about is if the bill moves forward in particular. I know there was also some questions on the applicability provisions towards the end of the bill and to what kind of activities this would actually apply to. So I believe that's another thing the committee wanted to look at this morning. And hopefully that gives you a bit of a primer for your discussion. If there's something else, Mr. Chairman, you'd like me to talk to, I'm happy to do so without running through the whole bill all over again.
No, we don't want to do that. I just want to get people up to speed. But Senator Craigle, it seems to me that we did pass one amendment with respect to the changing the 85% to 80%. Committee members recall that? Yeah. And so we're open again for amendments and discussion on the bill. And I was wondering if anybody, the two exclusions under H on page 6, lines 10 through 12 is a public utility, but lines 14 through 17, I'm having a hard time understanding what that is. It seems to be an exception for things that serve load outside of Wyoming. And I'm not sure why we would do that. So I would hope that you would think about maybe removing that piece, lines 14 through 17. But further discussion, any proposed amendments on the bill? Senator Steinmetz? No green light today. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're knocking the dust off on a Monday morning. I would make a motion to strike lines 14 through 17 on page 6.
Okay, we have a motion by Steinmetz. Discussion. So that language says, as meaning this section shall not apply to electric substations or interconnection facilities associated with existing or proposed transmission lines that serve load or that export energy from Wyoming. So the proposal is to remove that language from the bill. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Steinmetz.
Discussion. Because as you pointed out so deftly in our last committee meeting, then when you go back into energy collector system and it starts talking about substations or interconnections in that language, it made it very confusing. So if there's another amendment to tighten it up, but for now, I'd just like to delete this section.
Okay. Any other discussion? Anybody? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So that sounds like it passed and is removed from the bill. Anything else? Senator Boner, I say grab your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if we got this on Friday or not, but page 7, line 3, I believe there's a technical correction, including electricity up to, so insert up. So want to make sure we do that housekeeping item.
Sure, I remember I made note of that too, but I don't recall if we did that. I don't think we did.
Yeah.
So your motion is to insert on page 7, line 3, after the word electricity, the word up,
Correct.
so that it reads, deliver power from any commercial facility generating electricity up to, but not including, electric substations or interconnections. Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Back on the bill, Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to page 3, if we could, just further refining this concept of the minimum amount of landowners you need to, in order for these provisions to take effect. I was talking with the sponsor here, and it seems to me that I don't quite understand the reason for having that minimum of now 5 landowners involved when it comes to 85% of the ownership, but not 85% of the land. It seems to me that that should be consistent throughout both those paragraphs. So I'll just throw an amendment out there, see what the committee thinks.
Sure.
So basically delete language starting on page 16, starting with if not less than, and deleting the remainder of
You
lines.
just threw us because you were on, you mean line 16?
Yeah, sorry, line 16.
There you go.
My fault.
Yeah, so we're still on page 3, everybody.
So delete if not less than 3, then the remainder of lines 17 and 18. And then insert a new paragraph C that states something along the lines of this paragraph shall only apply if there are not less than 5 landowners. And with some leeway for LSO to make that sound good.
You bet. So shall only apply or not apply?
Shall only apply if there's a minimum of 5 landowners. So we're
Okay,
taking the same provision that's currently in paragraph B as amended and just extending it to A in both situations.
5 landowners. Let's just put it all together and see. Just from the top, this would say negotiate and have finalized land use and compensation agreements. A, that shall grant the person the right to occupy and use not less than 80% of the land upon which the energy collection system will be constructed, or B, with not less than 80% of the owners of the land upon which the energy collection system will be constructed, semicolon, and then a new and, I think, this paragraph shall only apply if there is a minimum of 5 landowners. And just by way of statutory construction, when we say paragraph, you're referring to what?
Oh, sorry, probably subparagraph B little I.
Just that B, right? Yeah.
Well, BI in particular, only subparagraph I, permanent I.
Let's talk conceptually here. I get what you're trying to achieve. I'm wondering if we would be better off leaving it in B and not creating a new C, because I think C kind of causes a confusion about there being mutual things. Maybe we could give LSO the right to kind of fudge that around.
Yeah,
Is that
hopefully-
okay with you?
Hopefully the concept is clear, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that minimum applies to both paragraphs A and B.
Oh, it applies to both. Well,
Right.
the 80%, okay.
Because we subdivide based off of.
I
the land
misunderstood
mass.
you.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, then I'm thinking maybe the best way would be after the semicolon. I'm confused as to whether to use an and. Because it is and it applies to both. Another way to do it is to restate that language in both A and B.
That makes
so
it
that it is
easier,
clear.
Mr. Chairman.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
I wish we could cover both.
microphone, please.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I wish we could cover both. I see where the senator's trying to go. If we have to put that language in both paragraphs, we can do that. Seems like we ought to be able to cover both.
Yeah. Well, another place to put it would be up under the I. Negotiate and have finalized land use compensation agreements when there is a minimum of 5 landowners in A, B, but to the sponsor. Mr. Crago, Senator Crago.
Mr. Chairman, if your objective is to essentially not make this act apply when there are less than 5 landowners, I think you could go to page 6 and put it under subparagraph H, where we just had the stricken language for paragraph sub Romanet 2. I mean, if that's your intent, is that this would not apply if there are less than 5 landowners, that's somewhere you could put it, Mr. Chairman.
That sounds reasonable. I've just got to think about this. So when does this apply? If the five landowners sounds like a pretty big deal to me. So, but how about if we get some public testimony on that issue? All right, Ms. Bud Fallon? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Case, members of the committee. Just very quickly, I understand what you're trying to do with this amendment, but if you're only talking about 4 landowners, then your amendment would say that they can condemn all 4 landowners. And we would oppose that. We're trying to force these collection companies to at least fairly deal with some of the landowners, and we're only trying to give them eminent domain over the person that is going to stop the entire project. And so while I understand your minimums, I'm concerned about if you've just got 4 landowners, condemnation can just start.
Senator Bonner?
Yeah, thank you. And this is the crux of the issue. These collection lines are relatively short, 20, 30 miles. And so if the bill is going to hold itself out there as being some sort of compromise where one single individual cannot, stop the entire project, then we have to have these numbers match up. And so if the 4 or 5 is too many, perhaps we can retain the 3 and make that 67% or something along those lines. Would that be a better way of going about doing it? Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. We'll let you comment on that.
Chairman Case, Senator Bonner, I actually think that would work. I just don't want to make this so that it's so easy to just condemn your neighbors. I understand the private property rights and being able to sell a wind farm or to a solar farm, but the concern with the government just running over the rest of them is what my concern is. So if you want to match it up with 67 and 3, I think we could support that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the table to go with 5. You want to withdraw it?
I'll withdraw, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the motion is withdrawn. We're back to square one. Senator Bonner. Ms. Delancey, do you want to weigh in on the issue of the number of the landowners? Okay? We're not trying to reopen entirety all the public testimony, but see, you brought someone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just wanted to comment specifically, since public comment was open, just to
Yeah,
offer a little bit of
5
comment
to
on
3
it.
landowners, okay?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have with me Mr. Jeff Pope. He is going to be speaking on this out of, respect for your rule of asking people not to pile on. I just wanted to introduce him, and I yield my time to him on
Mr.
this
Pope.
particular issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Pope. I'm a lawyer with Holland and Hart. I've been asked by Ms. Delancey to talk to y'all because eminent domain is one of my areas of practice. I've guided a number of companies through the process of condemning over the last decade, familiar with the law as well as the practical way it plays out. On this particular issue, to Ms. Delancey's point, we do support the discussion that was just had about the collector systems as they are defined in this bill are often short. Sometimes they only involve one landowner, depending upon where the substation that the utility has is located relative to the project. So the idea that we're going to span a dozen landowners or something like that, possible, but unlikely. So if we are looking at what the proper percentage is, as well as what the threshold is where you don't have to necessarily meet what's in the act, a smaller percentage as well as a smaller number of landowners would be appropriate. In fact, I think if you wanted to keep the 80% language in there, having language that says if there are 4 or fewer landowners would get you there, because you would still, if you're above 4 landowners, you'd be able to get to 80% with one holdout potentially. But if you're under that, where you have 4 or fewer, then you would still be able to exercise the right of eminent domain. Now, I will say as a practical matter, I have never encountered a company that we've represented that condemned for a collector system. I think the likelihood of this being exercised by anyone is very low. But the language I just threw out there would allow you to keep the 80%, but also have it so that if you have a small enough number of landowners, there is still the possibility for condemnation. Happy to take questions. Questions
from Mr. Pope? Thank you, Mr. Pope. Thank you, Ms. Delancey. We gonna pile on this topic? I'll take one more, and you're it. Because we did have full discussion on this bill on Friday, everybody. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. A question comes to mind concerning this. In the event that we have landowners of a certain size within holders, is the 80% associated with the land mass held by the landowner or the land mass that is comprised of the project? Furthermore, in association with the collector lines themselves, is the linear footage associated with the landowner part of the calculus? In other words, if I have a collection system that, let's say, runs 10 miles for arbitrary numbers, and across that 10 miles, 20% of it runs across some of the landowners that are in holders, are they then completely put out of opinion insofar as they don't meet the threshold of 85% or whatever that number is that we settle on? Is it better to have a language that specifically addresses the size of the footprint of the project and the landowners inside said project boundary, as well as the linear footage associated with the collector system as it crosses multiple landowners? That's all I have to offer, Mr. Chairman.
Let's get Mr. Crago to answer that. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. So when we talked about this in committee through the interim, the idea was the actual land used by the quote-unquote easement. I think that's how we envisioned this working, not, if it runs through one corner of one ranch that's 50,000 acres, they don't get to use the whole 50,000 acres as to affect the percentages set forth in the proposed bill. It would just be the actual easement area, which is all measured out. There would be surveys, obviously. So that's how you would be able to do the math on that.
Do you think that's clear?
I
think
do,
it
but
is.
we can surely clean that up if the committee so desires. I don't think that's a hard thing to do.
All right, thank you, sir. Back to you, Senator Bonner. Were you contemplating another amendment?
Yeah, and with the, the committee's input, I think that concept of, reducing the number to 67% and then having at least 3 landowners involved for these provisions to apply, I think that's a good path forward. Out of deference to the sponsor, I think we can make an amendment that goes along what he suggested, where we adjust page 3, lines 10 and 11, as well as 14 and 15 from 80 to 67%. Delete the aforementioned language on page 3, lines 16, 17, and 18, and then effectively reinsert it on page 6, line 14, where it says this section shall not apply to.
Mr.
And the language would be.
Go ahead, say the language first, Senator Bonner.
Language would be,
This paragraph.
oh gosh. If not less than 3 landowners are involved in the potential condemnation action.
Okay, and that's page 6. That's going to be a new Romanet 2 to replace the 2 that we took out. Would that be correct?
Correct, and maybe
Under
there's some
H.
grammatical corrections there needed, but you get that.
Got it. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would oppose that amendment. I think the whole point of all of this is just, I like the language as we have it in the other section. And I think the whole point of all of this is we're worrying about, one landowner holding up a project, but in essence, one landowner can condemn all the people that may not want to participate in this project now. And so we're trying to strike that balance, and I think that just changing, if you want to change 3 to 67.5%, I'm fine with that. I'm not sure that we need to make this exclusion in section H.
Senator Bonner, back to you.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that that's the 3 landowners is the current threshold in the bill. So I wasn't really looking to change that as much as the percentage. So once again, if we're trying to find that middle ground, where I think we all have the same goal. We don't want a single solitary landowner to control the entirety of this project one way, these sorts of projects one way or the other.
Right.
And so if we can agree that 67% of the land and the landowners, with a minimum of at least 3 landowners involved, I think that matches up.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but in A and B on page 3, that's an and or an or, and then you're applying the exclusion, a blanket exclusion on the other side, and so I think it changes the bill.
So it would seem to me that it would be divisible. I think the 67% is a divisible concept from the 3 landowners. Do you agree, Senator Boner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if it's better for the committee, we can simply just retain that minimum of 3 and not mess with that. Or I guess we'd have to remove it from 5 down to 3. But yeah, my intent was to, have it be that you need 67% of the land mass or the landowners and have that minimum of 3 apply. So however we do it, I guess I don't have a strong opinion.
My notes show that we took that out actually when we did the 80%. Is that right?
I thought we changed it to 5, Mr. Chairman.
Did we change it to 5? Oh, thank you. I do have that too, but 2 different sets of notes here. Okay, so would you agree that it is divisible or not?
I was hoping for to change the amendment to a way that's agreeable to everybody on the committee.
Is that friendly for his change? So he's proposing 67% and the number of landowners would be?
3.
Okay, in restoring the 3 on line 17, page 3.
Correct.
Don't need to divide that, okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. I'll
Mr.
enter a
Chairman,
no.
may I clarify? I just want to make
Absolutely.
sure I understand. So what what this amendment is that on page 3, line 10, the original 85% will be amended to read 67%.
Correct.
And then on page 3, line 15, again, the 85% will be amended to say 16%, or sorry, I'm sorry,
67%.
67%. And then on page 3, line 17 and 18, there are,
We in
No
essence
changes.
reinstate that language?
you reinstate that
With a
language. So
3.
it will only apply to paragraph I, section B. Is that correct?
We got that right? Senator Grego? Do we got that
Mr.
right?
Chairman, as you know, I'm an attorney, I'm not a mathematician, that's why I went to law school, so I don't have to do math. But just thinking about the 67%, I almost wonder if that shouldn't be 66, because we could have someone interpret that as, right, the percentage could be, 2/3 is actually 66.6666, and so I think we could run into some issues by making it, if the
Thank you,
committee's
Senator
intent.
Grego. I think you got it. Would you want to add that to your motion? We're going back and change the 67 to 66 per motion by Senator Boner.
We'll get this eventually, Mr. Chairman. That's the cheaper math for you. So yeah, 66, I believe that's right. Yeah. So I may well just make a new motion for 66.
That's great. Any discussion?
It's still 2/3, isn't it?
That's close.
Well, it's very close. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That I'd be a no. I still want 80. So, okay. Anything else on the bill? Senator Craigo, anything else? This is a big step. It could use more work. But it's still possible for us to take it up in the interim if we wanted to, for example. And that'd be true with or without a sunset. I'm worried about the consequences of sunsets because it might backfire. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. Anybody else? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I want to get this upstairs to continue the work on it, but I continue to struggle with the notion that that maybe we're closing the gate on those who come after this, making it more difficult for a landowner to take advantage of something that he or she might have in mind and
You
just
mean
feels-
running over the top of his neighbors?
Yeah.
Is that what they have over mind?
Yeah, maybe they. No,
Sorry, Senator.
I just kind of worry about this change, and I'm still getting my arms around it.
Fair
I
enough.
think it is a private property bill, but I just hope that we don't have unintended consequences.
Senator Boner. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad that we got this bill in a position where I can support it. Not only the numbers that we discussed here today, but, excuse me, this is the first iteration of the bill that doesn't potentially take landowners backwards in terms of compensation once accommodation does occur. So I'm glad we've had a chance to have a more nuanced discussion on this committee. And I'm glad to support it. I think we got a good balance, but want to reiterate, especially to those in the audience who represent ag groups, the best way of dealing with these challenges is to take care of your neighbor. If you have a wind or solar farm, you're in the driver's seat as a landowner. So you should be looking out for your neighbor. I've heard of, circumstances where the neighbor who gets the collector line gets 10 times the payment on that collector line than the landowner who has the turbines on their property. So there's no substitute for getting this figured out in the private sector. And really, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason we shouldn't. So I just encourage my fellow ranchers to, if you're unfamiliar with this sort of development, maybe reach out to your neighbors who do have this sort of experience.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else? Let's call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm going to clarify one more time that there are, excuse me, three
Everybody's
amendments.
got the crusties today.
I'm fatter now. There are 3 amendments on this bill. There's an amendment on page 3, replacing 85% with 66%. Then there's an amendment on page 6, which deletes lines 14 through 17. And an amendment on page 7, line 3, that inserts up after electricity. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Okay.
In the end, the language on lines 16 through 18 remain in the bill. And you've got that, and it's remained at 3. So I
Correct.
think that's correct. I think we do a roll call on
Okay.
it.
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 181, eminent domain energy collection systems 2. Senator Boner.
Aye.
Senator Dockstetter.
Aye.
Senator Landon. Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Case.
Aye.
You have 5 ayes.
So you two will present it on the floor, I assume? Do you want to handle the standing committee amendment? Would you be okay with that? All right, sounds like a good plan. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 183, moratorium solar and wind projects. Senator Hicks, welcome. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring you Senate File 183. It's a simple little bill. It does one thing. It puts a moratorium on wind and solar for the next 5 years. It's probably important to talk about why. One of the reasons that we're looking at this bill, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, just comes from a standpoint of the extensive reversal of some of the federal policies that have coming out right now and trying to understand the implications of what's going to happen associated with eliminating the subsidies for renewables and a number of other issues. But, Mr. Chairman, more importantly, I think it's trying to understand what the fundamental role of what all these energy policies that we've had for the number of years, the tax policies, the property rights associated with those. So I'd like to just walk through a few of those. What we've been dealing with for a number of years has been driven largely by federal subsidies. Our friends on the left coast with their renewable portfolio demands, eliminating fossil fuels and moving in a direction that's unsustainable. Wyoming has been at the brunt of that, quite frankly. It's had significant impacts on our legacy industries. Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, when we look at the overall consequences of what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years associated with this transition, we don't understand the implications to the reliability of the grid, the future costs of the consumers, what bonding is going to look like. What I do know, Mr. Chairman and members of the body, is this, and my colleague, Senator Landon, will recall back when we had, from about 2012 to about 2014, we spent in excess of $1 billion building schools in this state. And that came from coal lease bonuses, Mr. Chairman. That's gone. And we haven't replaced that because we've had a transition away from what our base load power generation was, which was also the base load power generation for our school program. We've never sat down and analyzed the impacts associated with those federal policies and how they're impacting the state of Wyoming. And as we move forward, we know that puts more pressure on every form of government as far as expenditures from sales tax, other taxes and revenues to fund our local schools. Mr. Chairman, in this budget alone, by the time we get out of here, if it comes out the way it's currently, we will have spent $500 million on construction of new schools in this biennium, $458 million. We have a giant looming liability out here. We've had federal policy that's reduced our ability to fund our school system. We don't understand the ramifications of that. It goes much further than that, Mr. President. Other ramifications that we're dealing with here is this: what's the cost associated to the grid and reliability and to the tax base? How do we keep reliable, dispatchable energy at the switch for our residents in the state of Wyoming when we're moving away from reliable sources of energy? Until we find something that's equivalent to base load power for coal to replace that, we've jeopardized the citizens of the state of Wyoming, and we've also increased the cost associated with that. Mr. Chairman, many of you know I probably have more wind than anybody in the state of Wyoming in my district. And I go home every week and I drive back and forth and I see the proliferation of wind. And I've always been kind of a free market capitalist, Mr. Chairman, but we're not dealing with the free market world. We're dealing with between states' portfolios, federal policy, warped corporations that are driving this, and they're sticking it to the people of the state of Wyoming. It's just time to slow down, say, let's analyze the ramifications to all of the things that are going on out there. Mr. President, I would like to talk about the implications of private property, because some people will say, well, this is a private property takings in this bill. You're prohibiting the private sector. To understand the ramifications, we need to understand the extent of private property rights and the limit of private property rights. As somebody who has always been a staunch supporter of private property rights, they do have a limit. And that limit is when you start to encroach on other people's private property rights. So, Mr. Chairman, when we look in the context of some of these solar farms, and I'm not opposed to them from a standpoint if it was a free market situation, but as somebody that's lived through this, and we put these on private property, the ramifications is not just on that private landowner, it's the transmission. Because then the transmission comes in and they go for literally hundreds of miles across all kinds of private property, and they have the right of eminent domain, and they just use that right and they blow through there with those transmission lines. We have the other concept of private property rights and the limit of what's the impact on the neighbors? And then what's the impact on the state's property, Mr. Chairman? I've yet to see anything that we've been amply compensated for the state's property. So on our statutory scheme, wildlife is a property of the state. Typically, these go through a federal environmental impact statement or an industrial siting. Those federal programs may try to mitigate some of those impacts, but they never or very rarely compensate for those impacts. On occasion, if the federal government has a significant nexus associated with that, they can require some compensatory payments. But when it's on private property or state property, the citizens of Wyoming own the wildlife of this state. That's a property right. And we do not compensate for that property right, Mr. Chairman. We need to slow this thing down, and we need to understand the ramifications of the grid, tax base, private property rights, and the overall structure of the changing environment at the federal level on how we're going to move forward with I sit here and I look and I say, look, we're looking at thousands, tens of thousands of acres of solar farms. What's the ramification of one obscure species going onto the endangered species list associated with that impact? That impacts every business sector in the state of Wyoming. Every single one is now under the threat of an endangered species listing. Do we understand the ramifications of that? And I would tell you, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely not. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm saying let's take a pause. Whether the pause is 5 years or 2 years or 3 years, we need to take a very serious, in-depth study and understand all of the ramifications to the tax base, to the state's property, to the grid, to the ratepayers, all those folks, and understand how we're going to move forward with these renewables, because they've had a tremendous impact. I don't know what's going to look like in the future, but I certainly know what's out there with industrial siting right now, Mr. Chairman, and it really worries me about the future of Wyoming. So I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Were you going to take us through the bill?
Mr. Chairman, it's a pretty simple bill. It just goes in there. So if you just go all the way through the bill, it just puts a moratorium on anything in the statute. So if we go to page 3, we start out there and it goes through right of eminent domain granted, weighs the necessity, and it just says subject to the moratorium on wind and solar facilities under 3511-2201. Brings in the same language. If we go over to page 4, this is the county regulations of wind and solar energy, puts the moratorium in the section under counties. You find that same language all the way through in subsection A, D, and E. On page 5, county and municipal authority. I have to comply with the moratorium on wind. In other words, the counties can't issue permits for those until until the moratorium is lifted in 5 years. Same thing, declaration of wind energy rights, brings in the moratorium there on 3427-103. Mr. Chairman, page 6 establishes the moratorium there. Page 7, now we're just getting into definitions, and the definition brings in a moratorium on wind and solar facilities under 3511-201. You see that language down in bottom of page 7. We're in 3512-106. This is permits for the Industrial Siting Council, establishes the moratorium there. Mr. Chairman, if we get over to page 8, this is 3512-115, additional requirements of other governmental entities after issuing a permit, and just establishes the moratorium there for 5 years. I'd stand for any questions.
And then cover page 2. Cover the exclusions on page 2 under, as used in this article. You have 2 exceptions there.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. Those are solar energy facilities as defined by 18.501, and wind energy facilities. Those are the 2 that the moratorium would be placed on based on the definitions in there.
And both those are net metering, I think. So these, it's excluding the small
It
residential
excludes
and
net
commercial.
metering, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I think that's important. We've had a lot of discussion, a lot of people are concerned in that area. Okay, committee, any question? Senator Dockstader.
On that point that you just noted, so you said it excludes the smaller operations, so you just excluded, Senator, ranching operations that have a much smaller setup? What are you doing with those folks? What do you say to those folks that are in the process of trying to balance the ranch budget by using this?
So, Mr.
Senator.
Chairman, Senator Dockstader, can you define, are you talking in the context of net metering type of facilities or some other component?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Dockstader.
you're talking small for the ranching operation that wants to put one of these together. I got a follow-up question to this too, Mr. Chairman.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah. So how does it address that? You're excluding them? Is that what we're doing here?
So, Mr. Chairman?
It's so, I think, Senator, it does cover what is a producing facility. That's the 18.5.501 in both cases. But it shall not include the net metering, which is under 37.16.101. That's the public utility statute. So that's where people that have rooftop solar, it's limited in that statute to be smaller. I don't know, it's 25 kilowatts or less is the size of that. So, and that's in the public utility law. Back to you, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's absolutely correct. So if it's for that personal use on the ranch, net metering, small windmills, whatever that is, that would be excluded from capture underneath this. So for that, but if you're talking small, meaning 20 commercial wind turbines on a private property, that would fall underneath this. So again, think for personal use, small consumption, whether it's a small business, a homeowner, or a ranch, the way I read this is not captured underneath the bill, under the net metering components, because it has, as the chairman has listed, a kilowatt hour cap on that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. And it's not a kilowatt hour, it's a capacity cap, so it's
Capacity.
kilowatt. If they produce for an hour, that'd be 25 kilowatt hours. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, and by the way, of course, 18 is our county statute, so these are within the county regulations, there's wind and solar energy facilities are listed there. We gave counties authority over them, and that's where those 18.5, 501A, Romanet 5, and the same one, Romanet 2, come from, the county statute. But I think the important point is these exclude what we traditionally think of as net metering systems under 25 kilowatt, maybe 25 kilowatt or less, I don't remember the exact. Further questions on the bill? Senator Steinmetz, did you have anything on the bill? You're a co-sponsor. Okay, why don't we take some public testimony? Who would like to address the committee on this bill? Yes, sir. And if you might want, I got a feeling, there's quite a few, right, Lily? And online, there's quite a few on this bill?
We have 3 online.
3 online. How many people want to testify on this bill in the audience, just to get a range? Okay, well, it's seen worse. I don't mean it's bad, I mean numbers, I've seen bigger numbers, let me just say that. All right, let's start there. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Case, Connor Nicholas, Bud Fallon Law Offices. I promise this is the last time you guys will hear from me, this committee, at least.
I doubt it.
Yeah, that's fair too, but I have 3 quick points. I want to be quick and make your time worthwhile, but the first thing I wanted to say is we just spent 2 days developing a bill that ensures that one landowner cannot basically take away the rights of another landowner to develop their property. Now we're considering a bill that allows for one state to take away the rights for a landowner to develop their property. I understand we call it a moratorium. The concern is this moratorium can be extended. There's nothing in the bill that would say that we're closed for business forever to wind and solar projects. Landowners have a right to develop their lands. And I am concerned that this bill will take that right away, and it's an important right. I think we can put in protections like we did in the last bill that ensures that some of the concerns that have been brought up today are addressed. I think we can bring up concerns when it comes to the eminent domain issue, like we've just previously done. If we are concerned about the dangers to wildlife, let's focus on those things. Maybe perhaps have an interim topic regarding those items, but to put a moratorium on all of these things and make a pause, not only harms property rights today, but also harms existing contracts that these landowners are relying on that could expire before the moratorium ends. And so I think we need to be careful taking away those property rights throughout the entire state. Number 2.
That was just one? You got to speed it up.
Very quick.
We got lots of
Very
people who
quick.
want to testify, and lots of bills.
I believe this is a local government issue as well. Local governments have sign authority who can address these concerns. I'm a very big proponent for local government. And if local governments decide that there needs to be a moratorium or a pause on these things, they absolutely can do that. They have that authority. Local communities should be the ones making these decisions, not a statewide issue. Finally, I'd say that this bill brings a message to the world that if we put a moratorium now, what's to say we don't extend that moratorium? We're not open to business then. and we are a business-friendly state. That's why companies come here, is that they think they can come here and can get their job done and not have the interference of the government. I'm very concerned about this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the gentleman? None. Let's go to the gentleman in the middle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joey Correnti. I'm the Executive Director of Rural Wyoming Matters. We are an educational, informational, and advocacy group out of rural Wyoming. It's good to be in front of the committee again. It's been a while. I think the only remaining members are the chairman and Senator Boner, so good to be back. I want to go to a couple of things the bringer of the bill spoke to, and I'm from his district, and I know in our district, we've had a few local control representatives, mayors, and county commissioners who've really leaned into pro-wind because it brings revenue. And regardless of what it does to other people's property rights, to the point where they've developed a new county seal that includes a windmill as if it is one of our legacy industries. And I think that is problematic because this could go away. The subsidies go away, the market goes away, the responsibility for producing the power in your own area, East Coast, West Coast, who want this kind of power, could go away. And now we're changing official seals to deal with it. Another thing the bringer of the bill brought was about wildlife. All wildlife in Wyoming is owned by the people of Wyoming. But there's another part of our Wyoming posture that every drop of water in the state of Wyoming belongs to the state of Wyoming. And a lot of these things, if you've ever looked at the base of one of these windmills or the ravages left in a solar farm after a hailstorm, this is a statewide problem because that is all of our water. That's water I'm going to drink too. I think the moratorium is fabulous because it says we don't know, but we're going to take a pause and look. And as all of you know, sitting in the chamber, it's got a sundown that can be addressed any legislative year, moved out, moved in. So if any of these other concerns we're hearing do come to fruition, the Senate, the House have the ability to address that and then bring it out or keep it longer. Lastly, I would like to see if this moratorium does go into effect that the committee or the legislature take up, what are we going to do with that time? What are we going to look at? And one of the things that really impacts us in rural Wyoming is not the fact that there's no reclamation. They just take the windmills down. That base pad is still there. All that oil that's been dropped, still dropped into the ground. There's tons of copper there. But what are we doing while they're in operation? Our landfills are being filled with these turbine blades. And I'll tell you, there is no landfill outside of rural Wyoming. You don't have them in the middle of cities. So it's coming to us. It's becoming a problem for us. And really, if we could look at how these are regulated and saying, okay, you're going to bring this into our state, your reclamation requirements are this, but during the preventative and active maintenance period, if the blades go bad, if this happens, it has to either go back east to the point of manufacture or west to the point where the power is going. These things cannot stay in Wyoming in perpetuity. And I have a lot more to say, but I know you have short time, so I just have to say that I relish the opportunity to be in support of a bill brought or worked on by the chairman. I look for that opportunity again in the future. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Correnti. Any questions for Mr. Correnti? Thank you very much. Back to you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robert Short, Commerce County Commissioner. In my district, sir, there are multiple landowners who have very large holdings who are able to site these projects specifically only on their land. I believe that this is an encroachment on their rights that we hold dear in this state for private property. Many of these ranchers have properties that are already transected by transmission facilities. We currently have some of the largest installed capacity in the state of Wyoming, greater than a gigawatt currently producing. We have multiple projects that are in the pipeline. One solar project will bring in 500 megawatts on nameplate. It's slated to begin next year. The chilling effect that this may have on private property owners and their ability to exercise their rights, to create revenue streams to help offset the costs of operating their ranches is incredibly frightening to them. Mr. Chairman, that's my job, is to represent their interests, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for the Commissioner? None? Let's get the next three up. Who else would like to address? Looks like we got three already. Doesn't take long. Mr. Brown, you want to start us off?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chris Brown, representing Powering Up Wyoming. We stand opposed to the bill, Mr. Chairman. As Wyoming has always been a proud energy state, and as demand for energy continues to increase, it's our position that we need all energy to move forward as a state. I can't imagine an instance where we hang a close sign on the state, closed for business, especially to an industry that has invested billions in the state and has intention to continue to do so. Mr. Chairman, as you've already heard and are likely to continue to hear, we also believe this is an infringement on private property rights. As Senator Dockstader alluded to earlier, if a rancher chooses to develop renewable energy on their ranch with a lease that helps them keep the ranch together, keep the kids back on the ranch, whatever the reason is, it's our position that it's their private property rights to be able to do so as they see best fit for their land. And so, Mr. Chairman, we stand opposed to the bill. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Senator Landon.
Mr. Brown, when I was reading this bill yesterday and trying to get arms around the impact, I really couldn't figure out how to do that. So if we shut things down for the next 5 years, I keep wondering, what's that going to cost the state of Wyoming? How would you go about understanding that? What's out there on the horizon? I guess I'm just not sure from a business standpoint what we've got coming that we're just going to shut down.
Sure.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Landon. Senator, wind in Wyoming pays full property tax, sales tax, and a $1 per megawatt hour generation tax. Solar pays property tax and the sales tax as well. But more so, Mr. Chairman and Senator, the industry has invested across the state. There are good paying jobs, and they have paid out millions in landowner leases to help landowners continue to have a diversified revenue stream to keep their properties whole. This wouldn't just impact new projects. This would impact projects currently underway, as one of the previous speakers noted as well. And so again, it's our hope that we will continue to remain open for business.
Thank you, sir. Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Brown, you or someone in the audience today, the actual financial impact, what is this going to cost if we shut it down?
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Dockstader, I did not come prepared with that answer, but I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards.
Thank you. Follow up with the entire committee if you would.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Our director.
Good morning, Chairman Case, Senators. I'm Jenny Staben, the Administrator of Industrial Siting for the Department of Environmental Quality. My job today is to point out any potential procedural issues and to also make you aware of a few facts. To start with, I would like to draw your attention to page 2, line 13. Throughout this bill, the word initiate is used. The use of initiate in this moratorium, in the way that it is applied, it would be helpful to be a bit more clear. This moratorium is inserted in a number of statutes in Title I, 18, 34, and 35. And so to use a word other than initiate, is the point of this moratorium to stop permitting, construction, or jurisdiction determinations? I think it would be helpful, instead of just using the word initiate, to just be a bit more clear. Using the term expand, that's easy to interpret. But instead of initiate, no construction, no permitting, no jurisdiction determinations. But something like that would just make it a bit more clear as to what is the starting point and what is the stopping point of this moratorium.
Say your 3 points again. No construction.
Is the point to say no construction, no permitting, and no jurisdiction determination? Like, is the purpose to completely stop any contemplation? Or can folks still get their jurisdiction determined, start their permitting process, and that sort of thing?
Explain what you mean by determining a jurisdiction, just
For example,
kind of in lay terms.
in lay terms, very easily, in Title 35, where that language is inserted, it's inserted in a section that discusses the Industrial Siting Council's determination if they have jurisdiction over a wind project.
Gotcha.
That's what I mean by jurisdiction.
Thank you. So is your proposal that you'd have to go to each section and
Well, you're,
choose construction, permitting, or jurisdiction, or would you add all three, or tell me?
I would suggest, instead of just using the word initiate, where, just say something simple like no construction, no permitting, no jurisdiction.
Okay.
And then it's inserted in all of those statutes.
I understand. So you
Just so
have
it's more clear.
one proposal to fix that. Okay.
Right.
Anything else on the bill?
I believe as you're contemplating this bill, you do need to be aware of the fact that there are currently 8 wind and solar projects that have been permitted, and they must be constructed by the year 2027. So you do need to be aware of those. They've been permitted, they just haven't been constructed yet.
And is that a term of their permit, or is that a term of qualifying for the production tax credit, or?
That is a term of their Industrial Siting Council permit,
Gotcha.
that they must be constructed by 2027. Those projects come up with a total of 2,123 megawatts. For, just so you have that knowledge.
Do you know how many turbines? And they're probably solar projects too?
Of the turbines, that will come up to 787 turbines.
Can always, I got room for one more.
And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 solar projects.
Okay. Senator Landon, you had a question.
Mr. Chairman, that was just answered. Thank you. I was curious about if that included solar. So solar is included in those 8 projects that you just referenced?
Yes, it is, sir.
Thank you.
Let's see, did you mean to have your microphone on? sir?
Yes.
Okay, Senator Dockstader, then Senator Steinmetz.
So just a follow-up to your point that we have 8 projects underway. Commissioner Short says we got projects in the pipeline. Mr. Nicholas saying we have, this would hurt existing contracts. What does it do to those 8 projects?
Director.
Chairman Case, Senator Dockstader, each of those 8 projects that have received their Industrial Siting Council permit may have legal grounds for a takings claim. Also, for your knowledge, this year in 2025, the Industrial Siting Council, we are expecting a scheduling of 2 wind projects and an additional solar project. I also want to make you aware of, since the early 70s, when the Industrial Siting Act was first enacted, the Industrial Siting Council has issued about 80 industrial siting permits. 34 of those have been to wind and solar projects. Wind and solar projects that have already been either constructed or are currently under construction are expected to provide a total of 8,600 megawatts.
Is that's a capacity number, right?
Yes.
That's their nameplate capacity.
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that they're going to supply electricity in that amount, ever. But that's their capacity.
That's their capacity.
Right.
That's what they're planned for.
Yes, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered on those 5 solar projects, how many acres that's planned under those projects?
Chairman
know?
Case, Senator Steinmetz, I apologize, I do not have those acreages in front of me.
But those applications would be online at the industrial siting. So
That is correct. They're on the industrial siting webpage.
would it be possible to maybe summarize the pending projects in a one-pager for the committee, both in terms of capacity and economic, just from their permits and the acreages?
Chairman Case, I do not have the acreages in front of me, but I can testify that those 8 projects are expected to provide $552 million in ad valorem taxes and $214 million in sales and use taxes for their construction.
So do you think you could maybe, the permits have acreages, don't they?
Chairman Case, they do. I can absolutely provide that information to you. I just didn't bring it with me.
No worries, that's fine. That'd be something for later, if we could. Anybody else? Director Staben, I have a question. In the industrial siting process, I hear from citizens a lot who feel frustrated because I think they misunderstand perhaps what industrial siting is. They try to participate in the process, hoping to stop even, or to and to my knowledge, the industrial siting has never stopped a project. I don't believe I've heard of any that have been stopped, either in renewables, either type of renewable project. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think so. But our citizens seem very frustrated that they feel big impacts from development of renewables in Wyoming on landscapes that historically were open, and they worry about birds, they worry about coverage of the ground, they worry about antelope migration. They have all these concerns, and I hear from them that they just feel like they never get anywhere. And they're very frustrated. And I know that's not true, that you take that stuff under, but how could we do a better job for those citizens that try to participate in industrial siting and just seem very frustrated?
Chairman Case, senators, frankly, I receive several calls from citizens. And when citizens call the Industrial Siting Division, I do inform them that they have a right in this contested case proceedings to provide limited appearance statements. I encourage them to write letters. I encourage them to write statements. If they come to the hearing itself, that also provides to them an opportunity where they can write a limited appearance statement, but then they are there and available to answer any questions the council may have. This is the same for any agency. If it would like to be made available for questions, they too can come to our hearing. I believe our citizens should take that opportunity to provide limited appearance statements so their concerns can be heard. Just calling the Industrial Siting Division or emailing us, we always respond to say, please send a limited appearance statement, because that statement then can be read by the council, it becomes part of the record, and it is available for the council to discuss. I agree with you, Chairman Case, that we do have concerned citizens. However, they are concerned, but if they would just take that next step and write a limited appearance statement, so we do have a record of their concerns, and so those concerns are available at the time in which the council is deliberating over whether to grant or deny a permit or what conditions go on a permit. The council does take their job very seriously. In fact, we've now moved to pre-filed testimony, that being that witnesses are to provide their information beforehand, so the council has additional time to review the evidence that's provided to them before the hearing, and then at the hearing, witnesses stand for questions. So I would encourage our citizens to write in their concerns more frequently. Typically, we only receive, no comments at all from citizens, or maybe two letters. I think the most we've ever received is 3. And then as far as environmental concerns, I know the council puts a lot of evaluation into information provided in the application itself, as well as comments provided from our state agencies.
Yeah, and Ms. David, I think you guys do a great job. I just think our citizens kind of thought when we first had industrial siting that it would be more about balancing Wyoming's future between development and non-development. And now we're kind of have our last resource on the line, which is our open spaces. And I think they're frustrated, and the fact that no permits have ever been denied kind of bothers them a little bit. And they probably don't understand the nuances of moderating or putting conditions on. But I do think they're frustrated, and they feel like our Wyoming is being run over.
And Chairman Case, I think also our citizens aren't fully aware of the bonding requirements For example, at this point in time, the division recommends acceptance of only bonds that, from companies that are recognized under the Circular 570. That is, the division, our recommendation is the exact same bonding requirements that are also required for land quality mining permits. Those bonds are reviewed every 5 years to make sure that they remain adequate. Sir, I think what I'm hearing from you is more education to our citizens would be helpful. The Industrial Siting Council, they are charged with ensuring that the project, of course, applies with law, but that it also causes no serious injury to the environment or the socioeconomics of inhabitants or folks that are expected to be inhabitants, as well as balancing the requests of local governments for impact assistance to offset that workforce coming into their community.
I have one final question. I'm so glad you're here and I appreciate it. I think there's also a feeling that the cumulative impacts are greater than the each and every individual impact. And that you know, a couple of wind turbines or one is one thing, and it has very little marginal change and they get a permit. And the next one has very little marginal change, they get a permit, and then it becomes cumulative, and then all of a sudden we have gigantic changes in our Wyoming. And they all were approved based on the marginal analysis. Seems to me no one is really doing a holistic analysis of the entire state and what this means for our Wyoming people and our Wyoming future, our Wyoming vistas, our Wyoming Golden Eagles. What do you think about all that?
Chairman Case, just so you are aware, each industrial siting application includes an analysis of cumulative effects of other projects within the area. As far as those cumulative effects being analyzed statewide and all of the, I like to talk with my hands.
Sure,
And
it's okay.
and all of the different analyses that could be conducted. The Industrial Siting Council does rely on the Wyoming Department of Fish and Game in their analyses. Typically, applicants are required to conduct like a 2-year wildlife survey before they even bring in their application to industrial siting. They often negotiate mitigation and other requirements by the Game and Fish Department. So although these projects, yes, it is an application for a singular project, but that singular project also involves 19 state agencies that we require a comment and review on the application from those state agencies, but the applicants typically engage with those state agencies well before, or even years before, to be fair, before an application comes into industrial siting. So although there, it sounds like there's a perspective that these applications or these projects are looked in as a insular event, in reality, you have your 19 state agencies looking at how, when this project comes in, how does that impact the landscape? The landscape being wildlife, water, jobs, school districts, hospitals. And so I would say each project is looked at for what its impact really truly will be. If that makes sense, sir. So instead of an overall state study, this is an analysis of what we have here. How does this project change that?
We need to move on, but I find your testimony really fascinating and informative. Would you say that you require more mitigation than you used to in terms of some of these projects?
Chairman Case, to be very honest with you, I've been an administrator for 1 year and I was the attorney for industrial siting the year before. But that is something I can research and get back to the committee on.
Because if that were true, that would support your hypothesis, I think, that it is looking at cumulative. Be interesting to get the answer to that.
Chairman Case, to be very clear, we do require a cumulative analysis of the economic impacts in these projects. But what I'm saying is, when a project comes in, it does have to describe how the applicant has to describe what those impacts are on the ground as far as wildlife. Then we rely on the Game and Fish Department in their comments and in the working with, or how they've been working with these applicants to let the council know what that impact would be. And we do that for 19 state agencies. I'm just using Game and Fish as an example because you had spoken about
It
eagles.
sounds very clinical and professional. It's just that we may not know when we hit the critical mark on golden eagles, for example. And we know that bald eagles are doing really well, but golden eagles aren't doing that well. But when we actually get to the point where, whoa, we missed this severe impact, it would be too late. It does sound to me like it's a bit of a piecemeal approach, and that even like the Game and Fish, for example, they look at the marginal population problems with eagles, and they're of course offsetting things that the federal government allows for the eagle take. But then what happens if you go a step too far and all of a sudden the population collapses because we've just blocked up every which way that they have to live? I mean, I'm not thinking you're catching that, but we're going to have more discussions in the future.
In Chairman Case, the council really, they base their decisions on the information provided to them.
I know that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Let's
sir.
go to Senator Bonner.
Yeah, real quick, and I just encourage the committee to look at one of these applications. I'm looking at one that's about 1,400 pages long. And as far as the impact on, especially raptors, that is something that is studied significantly, and they do change the sighting of the turbines based off of those studies. So I think it's important that we understand that. And if you read some of these applications, I think you'll find that to be the case. Now, I want to go back to some of the earlier concerns that, Industrial Siting Council can't really shut down a project. Have you ever, when you get those concerns, have you ever considered referring those individuals to, say, their local county commission, which can put a moratorium on wind development just as well as the state has, can? I know that's a conversation we had in Commerce County. It's been about 15 years ago now, but would you consider referring maybe some concerned citizens to the county commission, which can take a more tailored approach than certainly the state can if the answer is just no, we don't want it at all?
Ms. David.
Chairman Case, Senator Boner. Senator Boner, are you describing the 8 projects that are already permitted, or projects in general, sir?
Senator Bonner.
Just in general, and making sure the public's aware of all the tools that they have at their disposal. If they're dead set against this sort of industrial development, that there's things that other elected officials can do at the local level to basically shut them down. And that maybe the Industrial Siting Council process is not the right avenue if that is their desire. Would you consider maybe re-referring those citizens, those concerned citizens, to avenues that would maybe produce or possibly produce some fruit as opposed to the Industrial Siting Council process?
Ms. David.
Chairman Case, Senator Boner. Yes, sir. I only referred to my own division because I'm thinking of the calls I've received last week. Yes, sir. I encourage callers to contact their county commissions and to be active in that process.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You've been fun. Oh, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quickly, Director, thank you for all your testimony. Really good stuff. I have often wondered how many of these windmills are on federal property versus state property versus private property. Do you have that in some way, or is there someone who can tell me, a lot of the impact I'm sure is on federal land? And I'm sorry, I've just got a ton of questions. We're kind of doing this one on the fly. This one is one that I wish we could spend a lot more time on. Appreciate you being here. So,
Ms. David.
any answer to that?
Chairman Case, Senator Landon. Yes, I have that information and I can accumulate it and make it available to you, sir, as well as the number of acreages for Senator Steinmetz.
Do you have a sense whether more on private ground or more on federal ground. We won't hold you to it, but just,
Chairman Case, in this moment,
it's okay if you
that
don't
is
want
about
to.
30-some projects, but to be fair, larger projects are typically on the checkerboard just by their sheer size. It's the smaller projects, of course, that can typically be on private land.
Gotcha.
And that is such a vague response. I apologize.
No,
but I
it's-
can get
it's-
that information for you.
Yeah, we're not gonna, we appreciate that. Thank you very much. You've been very, very kind and diligent. Yes, sir, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Brett Kaler. I represent the Wyoming Economic Development Association. We represent over 200 economic developers, individuals, organizations, municipalities, and counties across the state of Wyoming. And among our top priorities, WEDA strives to allow Wyoming to be competitive for economic development, which includes supporting innovative economic strategies and investments to help Wyoming industries grow, innovate, and remain in the state and spur entrepreneurship. I want to speak to how our economic developers work to attract new businesses to their communities and to the state of Wyoming.
You're gonna keep it short, aren't you?
I certainly will.
Okay.
I think it's important to know that among the top priorities, reasons our economic developers cite for businesses coming to Wyoming is the predictability that Wyoming creates in comparison to our surrounding states. And unfortunately, this policy sort of damages some of that predictability and does have cumulative effects beyond just energy, but then into housing, business attraction, workforce attraction, and the like. I think we can point to several businesses who've moved to Wyoming specifically because we have the opportunity to provide electrons that are maybe outside of the norm of Wyoming's traditional energy industries. And a blanket ban on these power sources would restrict economic developers from attracting those businesses and retaining workforce. Additionally, this type of policy would stand between private property owners and their ability to negotiate business deals that benefit themselves at the expense of third-party providers who invest in the state. My final point I'd like to make is that a 5-year ban, a 3-year ban, whatever timeline that the ban creates is really sort of an artificial timeline because those contracting, siting, all of the permitting, planning, and construction that takes place in this type of process would be delayed beyond whenever this moratorium would then expire. And so I think it's important to know that while Wyoming's ability to attract business is on hold, the rest of the surrounding states and countries is still going to move forward in this way. And so we just hope that you would oppose this legislation, stand behind economic developers and the activities of the free market, and I'd stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Questions? Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Crowder, welcome. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Crowder, Interim Director for the Office of State Lands and Investments. As everybody on this committee knows, we're a revenue generating agency. One of those revenue streams is from wind development. That's a growing revenue stream for us. It's relatively new in comparison to oil and gas or grazing, but it is active. Currently, we have 54,000 acres under lease. That's to 24 separate leases. 11 of those leases are in a producing status. And Senator Steinmetz, that means 20,700 acres are under productive status. The annual revenue stream from all 24 leases is just over $1.3 million per year. So that's where we sit currently. We are looking at 2 new projects coming on board. We analyze an average of 1 to 3 new projects each year. So right now we're looking at 2 moving through the leasing process. Both of those will bring another 40,000 acres under lease. So it almost doubles what we currently have under lease. Each one of those is bringing anywhere from $330,000 to $630,000 just in the leasing part per year of revenue back to the state and the trust beneficiaries. Once those reach productive status, then obviously the royalty rates and the nameplate capacity fees and everything else comes back to the beneficiaries, but just the leasing component is $330,000 to $630,000 per year. I want to highlight that for the committee because as Ms. Staben mentioned, we don't know what the exact term of initiate means. Those are just under lease. They haven't gone through a ISD permitting process or a county permitting process or anything else. So if the term initiate means, do you need to get site control? Does that lease mean the leasing component that we would just stop at that point? Then that revenue would be harmed from that action. Right now, we don't have any solar leases on state land. There are a lot of
So
companies.
these are all wind?
These are all wind, sir.
Okay.
A few companies are asking for them. We're in the lease development phase of that, but we haven't initiated a lease. The Board of Land Commissioners hasn't approved one, so we don't know what that looks like yet. But I think I'll leave it right there, knowing that there's a lot of people in the room, but that's the impact that we have, and as the landowner for the state, wanted you to be aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Crowder. Questions for Mr. Crowder? Thanks a bunch. Mr. Delancey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name's Cindy Delancey, and I'm here on behalf of American Clean Power Association. There's a lot to unpack here this morning, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief, but there's been a lot of misinformation put forth. I think we just need to keep in mind that Wyoming is an energy exporting state. We export oil, gas, trona, wind, solar, all the above is what's needed in our power constraint environment that we live in. The state that figures out the power problem that we have is going to be the economic prosperous land. So by leaning towards any source of energy right now really helps position Wyoming be prosperous and increase some of the tax revenues that the bringer of the bill is concerned about. Right now, wind and solar is contributing to 22.8% of the electricity generated in Wyoming. I have given a handout to Ms. Sharp for your packets that really exemplify a lot of the benefits of the industry. 21.7 million are being invested in local communities, 21.9 million to landowners, related to additional diverse revenue streams to keep their ranches going. So on that note, Mr. Chairman, there's been a lot of discussion about preserving the landscape, concern about changes in the landscape. If that's a policy that this body is concerned about, perhaps we should be looking at subdivision statutes instead of the robustness of the industrial siting process. People, unfortunately, are just not, younger generations are not wanting to run the ranches as they pass hands, Mr. Chairman. And oftentimes, there's real temptation to sell off acreage, which ultimately becomes subdivided and, big box stores or those types of companies move in. Once a ranch or open space is subdivided, it's never coming back. Where these types of projects are temporary in nature. And oftentimes, many of our landowners, especially large landowners, are using these 20 to 30-year projects as estate planning tools to serve as a placeholder. Perhaps the next generation isn't interested in running the ranch, but holding in place and providing that revenue stream for the next generation to come back, run the ranch, is really something that is very advantageous to landowners. Relating to the notion of people, are opposed to this. We've heard many local governments, particularly those in Carbon County, go on record supporting these types of projects as revenue to their communities. The town of Medicine Bow, the city of Rawlins, we've heard the city of Casper speaking in support of wanting the blades in their landfills. So I just caution the committee that there is another side to this. And if Wyoming sends the wrong signal about stopping part of our industrial development, the question becomes who's next? We have a lot of different types of industrial development. Wyoming has been so blessed with so many different resources, and the world is watching what we're doing. To have the heavy hand of the state come in and insert themselves in negotiations for landowners, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, just isn't the right approach. You've heard the testimony from the regulators talking about confusing language. The bringer of the bill quickly glanced over, the components of this bill. But if you look on page 2, what this bill is doing is creating, it's essentially creating ex post facto effects of people that have already been in the pipeline, people that hold these permits, people that have invested billions of dollars to get on the list for infrastructure needs that supply chain problems have years out in advance. They have property rights in the permits that they have received going through our very, very robust industrial siting process. As Dr. Staben indicated, there's 19 state agencies weighing in. It's almost become basically a state NEPA process. as far as the analysis from all these agencies. We've been at this, this industry, Mr. Chairman, as you well know, because we've worked on this for a long time together, but 20 years pretty much that we've been at this. We're not rookies at this. We've really developed and refined and made our permitting process more and more robust. Additional permits and conditions are putting on projects that come through the process. And the companies that I work with, Mr. Chairman, are willing to do that. They want to get it right. They want to be good neighbors. They want to be good, good stewards of the lands, working with landowners, making sure that Wyoming can continue to grow and prosper. As related to stopping, as far as concerns related to taxes and where are we going to get the money, stopping the process isn't the way to help us find additional revenue as revenue from other sources decline. We need to be growing the pie. We need to be adding these projects. These projects are going to be built regardless. We want them here in Wyoming so we can be able to generate the revenue that comes from these projects. And as you work through the bill, Mr. Chairman, again, these words on, to and beyond, initiate, expand, is just absolutely detrimental to people that have those property rights, as I mentioned. As you move on to page 3, all the discussion about eminent domain stands in direct conflict to this committee's actions related to the bill that we heard before this. So again, we're trying to create, direct conflict in our statutes doesn't help the public, as we heard about the concerns that you raised about people wanting to be involved in this process. The question then becomes, what law applies? What are we following? How do we understand the impacts so people can be involved? But moving on to page 4, words erect, construct, reconstruct, enlarge facilities. What exactly do those terms mean, and what are the implications on existing permit holders and those that are in the process? Again, those that have done the analysis, acted in good faith, where does that leave them? So again, Mr. Chairman, American Clean Power Association does stand in opposition to Senate File 183 for all the reasons that I articulated. And again, concerns of wildlife. We should be looking at fragmentation of habitats in other ways besides stopping projects. And as you well know, and this committee knows, we heard the testimony about the federal land hosting a lot of these turbines. The NEPA process is a very, very extensive, robust, where cumulative impacts are looked at. Wind permits, projects need to get eagle takes. I mean, there is no stone left unturned in that 1,400 pages of that the applicant is required to commit. So this notion that industrial siting is just some kind of rubber stamp for an application, like it's not. It's a very, very extensive, robust process that does afford for public participation in many steps of the process. So, Mr. Chairman, if we start going down this path, I think it really sends a wrong signal to the world that Wyoming is closed for business and not willing to innovate and try to work on, keeping current with the times. So thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lancy. Questions from Mr. Lancy? Any questions? Mr. Lancy, you mentioned that these are temporary. So I know that they have permits that are fixed in duration. But what happens after the permit runs out? What's most likely to happen? And here's what I'll submit to you. Is it because the roads have already put in, massive power lines have been built, bridges, collector lines? The most highest, best economic use at the end of the permit period is to continue the permit. Perhaps, if new towers or generators or blades need to be put up, that will happen. But it does not at all seem likely to me that these are temporary and limited to 20 or 30 years. I think we're more likely, as long as the wind blows and we need energy, and it's an economic way to get energy, I would imagine these projects would continue for the foreseeable future, under different permits, but continue. You're certainly welcome to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly that might be the case on some projects, but the way that agreements are written, landowners have the option to not renew, to say, I don't want these solar panels on my wind or on my land anymore. I don't want these turbines on my land anymore. By giving the landowner that option and that control to decide what's best at the time. We really don't know what Wyoming's going to look like in 30 years, but we certainly know if a ranch is sold, subdivided into 5-acre ranchettes with big box stores all over the place, we know for sure that there's no going back from that. At least this gives us an option and the landowner to make the option of what is in their best use for their private property. So with that, I think it does at least give a little bit of a placeholder.
So it helps the people who have these facilities on their land, and everybody's been pretty clear about that. And then they would be able to extract a better payment down the road. But people of Wyoming don't have a participation in that. We're going to be looking at wind turbines on these existing sites for potentially 100 years.
That's a potential, Mr. Chairman, as well as the potential of looking at subdivisions, utilizing water, power. It's sort of 6 1, half dozen the other, but these projects allow landowners to make decisions on what's best for their property, how to monetize their land, their investments. Thank you.
Let's go to you.
Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Marcy Kindred, and I'm here today for the Working Families of Wyoming as the Executive Director of the Wyoming State American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrialized Organizations, and we are expressing our deep concerns about Senate File 183. We understand and respect that Wyoming has diverse views on energy development. However, this is not about choosing one energy source over another. It's about protecting free market principles and job opportunities. Wyoming workers have always been pioneers, embracing every opportunity to strengthen and expand our state's energy leadership. Our members work proudly across all energy sectors, contributing to Wyoming's position as a national energy powerhouse. The proposed moratorium on renewable energy development represents restriction on business growth and worker opportunity that goes against our state's values and pioneering spirit. Moratoriums should be actions of last resort, used only when absolutely necessary and with clear, specific reasons. We've heard today the in-depth work that has been done on this topic. This bill fails to meet the standards and concern that would call for a moratorium. Instead, it artificially restricts market growth and limits opportunities for Wyoming workers to expand their skills and earning potential across our state's diverse energy landscape. Our members are currently working on projects that expand Wyoming's energy portfolio, adding to our existing energy strength. This moratorium would unnecessarily restrict business growth, limit job creation at a time when we should be embracing every opportunity to strengthen Wyoming's economy and create more pathways to prosperity for our workers. Rather than implementing a blanket ban that restricts free enterprise, we should focus on developing thoughtful policies that enhance Wyoming's position as an energy leader. Our members are ready to participate in this process, sharing their frontline expertise to help craft solutions that work for everyone. We urge this committee to reject Senate File 183 and instead work with us to create policies that support business growth, respect free market principles, and keep Wyoming's energy economy strong and competitive. Together, we can continue Wyoming's proud tradition of energy leadership across all sectors. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Kindred? Ms. Kindred, is your client Wyoming-based or nationally based?
Wyoming State.
Does it bother you at all, the high percentage of out-of-state efforts that go into building renewable facilities in Wyoming? And the number of people that come from out of state to, nothing's manufactured here, obviously, but even the erection and some of the construction, the tower work, it's all out of state. And I don't know about the electrical, but I'm guessing that there's a lot of out-of-state electrical too. Does that bother you?
I know that I think I'm confused by if out-of-state entities are bringing jobs for my members, I'm absolutely in support of that.
So your members are in Wyoming?
Yes.
So if they bring in electricians from out of state and your members don't get those jobs, does that bother you?
I know for a fact that a lot of these organizations, I work with them.
Yeah.
do provide jobs to Wyoming workers. They're not bringing in outside workers, they're hiring from our state. And they know
What
that,
about like the cranes and the transport? Are those in-state people too?
many of them are
Okay,
in-state.
all right, thank you.
Are you, you're implying that they're only hiring from out of state?
No.
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand your question.
Not at all. I just think a lot of the economic benefits that accrue when these things are constructed go to out-of-state entities. That's my hypothesis. Because the workers are, this is why the hotel industry loves this stuff, because the workers are transient. They're not from Wyoming in a lot of cases, but I would love it if you would supply us with information about the in-state contributions. That would be fabulous.
That is on my afternoon to-do list. I will have it for you this afternoon because I know that many of these jobs are for Wyoming workers.
Great.
And that's what I'm here saying, that this is bad for Wyoming workers. We have folks working on projects now. We have folks ready to work on projects to come. And this bill sends those jobs elsewhere. That's what happens. Because we know when businesses are looking to bring job opportunities, to bring their organization here, their business here, they're looking for predictability. And this bill does provide some predictability. It's pretty predictable that Wyoming is closed for business for at least the next 5 years. So they're going to take those jobs and opportunities to another more business-friendly state. And I think that's a shame because Wyoming has always been very proud to be business-friendly. This is turning away from that.
Great. We'll look forward to getting that information from you. How about you, ma'am?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Bunch. I am the Manager of Government Relations and Stakeholder Engagement for Blue Earth Renewables. We are currently working on 2 wind projects that we're trying to get built in Carbon and Albany counties. I just want to speak today about our concerns over this bill. We have been committed to working with the people of Wyoming. We've worked hard to form good relationships with the neighbors, the communities, the landowners that we are building our projects in. One example of that is we've been supporting the Food Bank of Wyoming since we've started looking at our projects here. We've currently to date given over $31,000 to help Rock River Food Bank specifically and the Wyoming Food Bank more generally. We commit to continuing to those partnerships while we're in Wyoming. We're helping support the diversity and economy of Wyoming. If this moratorium were to go into effect, it would impact our ability to build our projects. And Senator Landon, I know that you had asked some questions, and while I don't have specific numbers for you on totality, I know that our project, we're investing more than $1 billion in capital, 420 construction jobs over our 2 projects, and once built 24 full-time jobs in the Medicine Bow Rock River area. I would say that that would be sad to lose out on those jobs and that taxable income that your state would be losing out on. This sends a message to businesses that Wyoming no longer wants us here, which is sad for us to hear. We're hoping that we can work with everyone to ensure that we can still build these projects. I have spent a lot of time up here now. I love the people up here, and I was looking so forward to continuing our work here. So I certainly hope that we can work this out so that we can continue to build our projects in Wyoming. I know, Chairman Case, you brought up a point about wildlife, and I just wanted to point out that there are a lot of new technologies that are here and are continuing to develop, but one allows for basically a new technology that allows us to look at the skyline and actually turn off blades if there are eagles in the area in order to try to mitigate any damage to those birds. And so there are lots of new technologies like that. We work very diligently, our regulatory teams work very diligently with state and federal entities to make sure that we are protecting the environment of Wyoming. I so appreciate your time today, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Ms. Bunch? Thank you, Mr. McKay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me today. Rennie McKay, President of the Wyoming Business Alliance. And just a quick recap on the Business Alliance. We're a private nonprofit, and our members are businesses and companies of all sizes, all industries from all over Wyoming. And I'm just going to sum it up that our goal is to help our members grow their businesses in Wyoming. And so we are opposed to this bill, and we come at that from the perspective of we represent, my members are work in agriculture, and so they have an interest in this, also power producers, and then also consumers. And I think you all are pretty familiar with this change that has happened in the last couple of years that I think is very significant to be aware of, and that is we're now looking at a situation where the country is increasing its power demand. And that is pretty recent. I think you would all remember the time when it seemed like our power demand was on a decline. And that change is pretty significant for the opportunities in Wyoming, because if we can help both provide that power that's now in demand, but also site some of the projects that are going to use that extra demand that is currently and could in the future really provide great opportunity for Wyoming's economy. And Senator Landon asked about can anybody estimate what this could impact? I think the next 5 years are particularly important when you look at kind of the opportunity for growth in Wyoming and for the whole country, because this is a moment when a lot of data centers are getting sited around the country. I was looking at ERCOT's data, and that I think we have a really good competitor out of Texas in terms of producing power and then potentially benefiting from that power. ERCOT, as you all know, is just that region just for Texas. They're predicting a 60% increase in power in 2025 alone. I think they call it large flexible load. So they're really attributing that to AI and data centers. And that is a really incredible opportunity, I think, for Wyoming's economy. It already is and could be in the future. So I just want to kind of make a point there that as the Business Alliance weighs in on this one, that's how we look at it, is those three different members of the Alliance and the impact that this could have on them. So thank you very much for thinking about this. I know how thoughtful you all are about the fact that if there is demand for power increases, what is the impact for Wyoming? And how do we balance economic growth with those things that I know you treasure, Chairman, but I think that there are incredible protections in place. I've worked on a few of them in my career. And so I think we've got a lot of great opportunities also to create more jobs. We've got linemen coming out of Western Community College right now. So Wyoming kids going to school there, going to work in the power field. You've got a crane operator out of Cheyenne. You've got manufacturers that have traditionally worked in mining for decades and now have added some wind power manufacturing to their the scope of what they do. And that's really helping them grow and helping the manufacturing sector grow. So I think this is a time of opportunity for Wyoming's economy. And so I just urge you to oppose this bill and thank you for your consideration of it.
Any questions for Mr. McKay? Thank you, Mr. McKay. How about you, sir?
Good morning, Chairman Case, members of the Senate Corporations Committee. My name is Kevin Quinn. I'm Senior Manager of Government Affairs for Invenergy. Appreciate the opportunity.
What was the name of the company?
Invenergy, I-N-V Energy.
I-N-V
We hear it pronounced all
Energy.
sorts of ways, though.
And your name again, I'm sorry.
Kevin Quinn.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So Invenergy is an all-of-the-above American energy leader with a proven track record of more than 2 decades. We have a portfolio that includes wind and solar, but also natural gas, energy storage, transmission, and solar manufacturing. We've been working in Wyoming for nearly a decade and developed 4 wind projects in Carbon County and two that are operational and 2 in construction on the Carbon-Albany County line, all of which have been or will be sold to Rocky Mountain Power, which, as you know, provides power to Pacific Core territory, including Wyoming ratepayers. In addition to these completed projects, we are in the late stage development of a 120 megawatt wind project in Uintah County, just north of Evanston. This is a relatively small project, but it is expected to generate $25 million in property taxes, $42 million in land payments to Wyoming residents, and $13 million in wind production taxes. This is one of the previously permitted projects that the ISC had mentioned earlier. So, I think wind and solar may not be for everybody, and that's okay. As developers, we feel it's our responsibility to earn and maintain our social license to operate, to negotiate in good faith with landowners, and to work with local governments and willing communities to host our projects. We know that different energy resources can be polarizing, but we believe it's up to the consumers, the utilities or commercial or industrial customers, to decide what resources are most affordable and the best fit for their energy demands. In the same way that we would hope other states wouldn't enact a moratorium on natural gas development, I'm here to request that Wyoming please not enact a moratorium on renewable energy development. At the end of the day, we're just a business asking for a fair chance to compete in the marketplace and not have the state dictate which of our products we can offer. So as an American company and leader in energy, we urge you to vote no on this bill. Thank you for your consideration. Happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Quinn? Senator Landon.
So real quickly, Mr. Chairman, I know we got a long ways to go. Mr. Quinn, I'm hearing from my people up in the center part of the state who work in this industry that the industry is getting better, that those power facilities that are run by wind have gotten a lot more efficient. And then the second question is regarding subsidies. Subsidies, to my understanding, were on their way out. Tell me real quickly about the subsidy picture and then also about how much better these wind towers are getting.
Mr. Quinn.
On the production side.
Sure. So with the caveat that I'm not an engineer, they have become more technologically advanced. That includes both the efficiency of the turbines being higher megawatt, as well as the engineering of how the project overall is designed. I think back in the day, they used to design projects and maximize one wind turbine, then the second, then the third, and so forth. And now I think our engineers kind of look at the comprehensive, resource, the wind resource in that area, and try to maximize the entire project rather than maximizing each individual turbine. So that's a little bit on the efficiencies. And then you'd asked about subsidies. Different states offer different things, but the federal government does offer production tax and investment tax credits. I think like any homeowner who's looking for a way to save money in energy efficiency or something like that, I think we as a business are going to look at and accept any sort of anything that will, make our projects more cost competitive.
And Mr. Quinn, I think Senator Landon was thinking perhaps that subsidies are going away. They were certainly extended under the Inflation Reduction Act, and I don't think and I'm not aware of legislation to eliminate them, so.
At this time, I'm not
They've
either.
been up for renewal half a dozen times, and they've always been renewed. So would you agree with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. So, it's been a week or two of the new Congress. I think they're getting their feet under them. But to my knowledge, no, there's not a bill that currently exists that would do that.
Thanks a bunch. Let's go to, Senator Dockstader has a question.
Mr. Quinn, Mr. Chairman, specifically where are you located? Specifically, how far along are you with the Uinta project?
To you, Mr. Quinn.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we were permitted through the ISC. We were permitted years ago and then kind of continued construction and renewed our permit last year. We also have, I believe it's a conditional use permit with Uinta County. We have all, leases signed that we would need for the project. We have a interconnection agreement signed with Pacificor. And I think at this point are kind of still working with Wyoming Fish and Game and the BLM on a couple right-of-way issues, but currently having conversations with potential customers with offtake agreements.
Mr. Chairman, I just didn't
Go ahead.
hear where the company was located.
Uinta County. But
Where
your parent company.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, so we're headquartered in Illinois, in Chicago.
Chicago. Thank you. Anything else from Mr. Quinn? Mr. Schwartz, welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Nice
Chairman.
tie today.
Why, thank you, Mr. Chairman, you as well. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I am Andy Schwartz. I'm representing the town of Jackson. I have two basic comments. I'll start with the first one. The town of Jackson is opposed to this bill. As you might recall, when I testified think it was last week on a different bill. I discussed the cooperative efforts between the town and the county and the local energy provider to reduce consumption. We are currently in the process of creating a community solar project. It is being funded by subscriptions, grants, and approximately, I believe, $2 million is special purpose excise tax. And I think Section 3 of this bill will cover it because there is an application in for a CUP in Lincoln County. But in the interest of belts and suspenders, on page 2, Romanet 1, I'm suggesting language that notwithstanding the language in 185501, a solar energy facility for the purposes of this act will mean a rated power capacity of more than 2 megawatts, which will cover this, this project comfortably. My more,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman?
No, I was just, and you'd put that where?
On page 2 lines, it would be after line 6, in addition to line 6.
Okay. And 2 megawatts?
I'm picking, the
That's pretty
current,
big.
the current project, Mr. Chairman, is a 1 megawatt. And I'm just doing 2 to allow a cushion, but 1 megawatt would be sufficient in that language for this current project. But I think there is a hope that community solar would have, down the road, they try again. And I don't know what the megawatts would be for that facility.
And what do you got against wind turbines? You should put the same thing in the wind turbines, because in Teton County, you could put up a lot of wind turbines around. How would that go?
Mr. Chairman, if you would desire to put that in, I would be comfortable with that.
I think we should have reciprocation. That'd be good. Thank
I
you, sir.
believe in reciprocation in general. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My more general comment, in my experience as a county commissioner, and also this summer during the Regulatory Reduction Task Force, moratoriums come up. Moratoriums are an extreme act, and they generally, the conversation in the Regulatory Reduction Task Force, and when we did them in Teton County years ago, there's a timeline that's involved that you let the public be aware of. I recognize there's a 5-year repeal of this, but identifying the purposes of the moratorium and the mechanisms that are intended to be pursued to reach the, the goals of that moratorium are not present in this bill. And I think that is a deficit. I think the public is entitled to get a better sense of what is necessary to conclude the moratorium and how long it is anticipated to take. And I just offer that as a suggestion, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Schwartz? And you're representing Town of Jackson today.
Town of Jackson.
Right, thank you. I'm going to take a time out and just do some housekeeping. I don't think we're going to get to the constitutional apportionment bill or any bills after that, so we won't take that up today. That'll be the first order of business on Wednesday. And we'll probably start early on Wednesday, too. Thank you. Anything else? Mr. Steenberg, good to see you.
Good to see you. You didn't brag on my tie. I'm a little disappointed.
Schwartz can't tie a tie. He has to get help to do it, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I think it doesn't matter what business we do, somebody will have something against it. I raise a few cows and there's people that think my cows are destroying the universe, right? There's even probably a few people, Mr. Chairman, that think that another hotel would be a bad thing. But in general, we need to support the free enterprise system. And
how about if you guys keep it down? We're trying to hold a hearing here. If you want to have a conversation, please take it outside. Thank you. Back to the witness.
The witness, but Mr. Chairman, it's important that we support the free enterprise system. And that just because there's something that we don't like about a business, that we go in and try to keep that business from happening. you bring up some real concerns that I think we should be interested in. Are the workers living in the state of Wyoming? I think that's something we need to do better on in almost every industry, right? But I think as you look at a lot of the good that some of these projects have done, well, I guess I'd just say it like this. We had a project here in Laramie County, and we had a lady that I knew that was a rancher's wife. She was pretty passionate about arguing for it. Of course, it was on her property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, man, you got pretty passionate about that. Why were you so passionate about it? She said, this gives me a way to make sure my great-grandkid can still be a rancher. Right? And so this is a planning tool for some of these guys. And while these other concerns are important, the fact is this is making us money, and we should support free enterprise. No matter what kind of business you want to do, if it is legal in this country, Wyoming should support that and encourage that, and not get convoluted with if there are tax breaks or benefits on the federal level. We can go argue about that. But if as an entrepreneur, I want to take that shot, then I should be able to do it. I would just close with this. I had a political science professor in college make the comment that, what makes America work is that you have the right to do whatever stupid thing you want to do. The freedom to do it, right? And we need to continue to allow, no matter how we feel about these businesses, we should have the right to pursue them in the free enterprise system and operate them within our state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Steenberg. Questions for Mr. Steenberg? Thank you. Ms. Charquette?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kara Choquette. I work for two companies, Power Company of Wyoming, developing a wind project south of Rawlins in Carbon County, as well as Transwest Express, and a broader portfolio of companies we're calling the Wyoming Clean Power Center, through which we anticipate adding solar, battery storage, and hydrogen-capable natural gas turbines. So we ask for you to oppose this bill today for the reasons you've already heard about, including private property rights. We have not yet filed a permit for these additional projects, but we certainly have initiated them, but not sure how initiated means, and doing the wildlife studies and the things that you've talked about. I will add just a few more things that you haven't heard about today. One, just to remind the committee, the Wyoming legislature created the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority and then the Wyoming Energy Authority to, quote, diversify and expand the Wyoming energy economy. These new wind power and solar power plants that complement our existing wind and transmission will target new local and long-distance markets for Wyoming-made electricity. I would note that we as a wholesale power provider are trying to diversify and expand and meet that mission, and these projects will have no impact on Powder River Basin coal. The vast majority of Powder River Basin coal is shipped east and south. You can see that in the Wyoming Mining Association's excellent annual report. The electricity that we seek to transport to long-distance markets would be Southern California, Arizona, Nevada, areas that Wyoming is not reaching today with transmission or with electricity. So these projects will help fulfill that mission. Their construction and operation will create much-needed new and diverse jobs for Wyoming workers, which we do aim and try to hire Wyoming workers as much as possible. We've made a map showing all the locations of where we have hired Wyoming workers from across the state. Those include places like Lusk and Fort Laramie and Torrington, Hillsdale, all the way to Evanston, Lyman, Lander, Riverton, Shoshone, Thermopolis, Cody, where workers have come to work on our wind project, either for one season or for multiple seasons. But these are the kind of projects that are attracting Wyoming workers from all over the state. Our wind project and transmission project alone would contribute an estimated, under the current taxes, over $1.2 billion in tax revenue to the state of Wyoming. That's through property taxes that largely fund schools and local governments, as you know, sales and use taxes that fund our municipalities and the state general fund, and the electricity tax, which benefits all of the counties that are hosting wind farms, as well as the state of Wyoming general fund. You've heard a lot already from the expert, Dr. Staben, about how these projects are permitted through the Industrial Siting Council. And she's right. Industrial siting typically doesn't stop a project because all of this work has been happening for often years before the actual permit hearing. There's so much involvement and work with Wyoming Game and Fish in advance. And I also brought, if you haven't seen, Wyoming Game and Fish guidelines for wind and solar energy development, just updated in 2021. These assure that impacts to wildlife are contemplated through the project development process and that we avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to that wildlife. In fact, we have a multi-species conservation plan in place that's signed by, for the wind farm example, Power Company of Wyoming, the landowner, and Wyoming Game and Fish, and it requires concurrence by Wyoming Game and Fish before the Industrial Siting Council would even issue the permit. So that kind of work in collaboration is happening. I would say there's also, for the benefit, a guide to permitting solar energy in Wyoming produced by the Wyoming Energy Authority, as well as a guide to permitting wind energy projects in Wyoming that provides a lot of great education and information about how these projects come together. I would say, of course, as we talked about too, if projects like ours that are in the checkerboard have a federal nexus, then all of those stringent federal environmental review and regulations come into play as well. Regarding land use, the wind project that we're pursuing, Power Company of Wyoming, is using less than 1% of our ranch. The total disturbance area, which we will reclaim and only use that final footprint of the land, is less than 2% of the ranch. So it's kind of like saying you have like a 3-acre property and a 2,000 square foot house, so you have a 3-acre house. We don't have a 3-acre house. We have a total footprint for the wind project of less than 1,500 acres of the ranch. So one other question, I think it was Senator Dockstader asked about what is at stake if we have a moratorium? There was a study conducted by the University of Wyoming in 2016 that looked at a conceptual set of 5 wind projects, which was about 6,000 megawatts of wind. Our project was in that group. And they estimated that those 5 projects would contribute almost $2 billion in revenue, again, to help fund Wyoming schools, the state, and local governments. And a 2022 University of Wyoming study said that an average 500 megawatt wind project would contribute $7 million a year in tax payments. So the mitigation we're doing is extensive. We're creating good jobs in Wyoming. These are the type of projects that help contribute to Wyoming's energy strategy, diversify and expand. And so again, we'd ask for your opposition to passing this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Choquette? Let's go to Landon, then we'll go to Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned the hydrogen piece. Can you expound just real briefly on what is contemplated there?
Ms. Choquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we're exploring and looking at providing a natural gas generation plant that would provide or burn natural gas today, but could be converted to using hydrogen in the future. So that's something in the energy space a lot of companies are looking at, is that ability to use potentially hydrogen. So is there potential in the future to make hydrogen and then use that hydrogen in a generation plant in the future? So we're looking at the type of technology that could do both.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that a lot of your energy is being exported to the West Coast. Why are you, I mean, I would think that there's more costs associated with building somewhere farther away than there is where you're exporting the energy to. So why aren't you building in those states? Why did you come to Wyoming?
Ms. Choquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Steinmetz, for the great question. So the ranch is owned by the Anschutz Corporation, which operates a working cattle ranch. It will remain a cattle ranch. So our company owns the property where these projects would be. So the question for our projects has always been, it's not like we're going to take them someplace else. They happen in Wyoming or they don't happen at all. And the reason that we're trying to target external markets is, one, to help support this mission to diversify and expand the Wyoming energy economy, but also the amount of power that we're able to produce vastly exceeds anything that's needed in the state of Wyoming. So the state of Wyoming, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, had a total production of electricity of about 43 million megawatt hours at the end of 2023. But the in-state sales of the in-state load is only about 16.5. So there's just not a need for all of the power that we would be able to provide. So our wind project alone, not counting these additional things, we contemplate producing an estimated 12 million megawatt hours a year. That's about a quarter of all of the electricity that's already created in the state of Wyoming. And so until, I will say recently, the likely market, the obvious market, was then to try to take this power to new states that aren't buying power directly from Wyoming today. As you all know, the increased demand from data centers and AI has changed that a little bit. We do see opportunity to serve load in Wyoming. We do see the opportunity to use cost-competitive Wyoming wind and solar power, which is the type of power that these companies want, to help try to bring that investment to Carbon County. So that is a new thing we're looking at, and I'm happy to see that market demand growing.
Anything else? The gas plant you mentioned, would that be part of the ranch operations, or would that be in Carbon County and be part of that facility, maybe to back up the wind?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we anticipate creating, again, we call it the Wyoming Clean Power Center as a hub for all of these different electricity resources. So we would have wind, solar, battery storage potentially. Again, these additional projects are still in the, let's do the wildlife surveys and initiating the work, plus the hydrogen-capable natural gas turbines.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else? How about you, ma'am?
Hi, Elena Campbell, Mr. Chairman, committee members from Sheridan. Listening to this whole conversation, not anticipating I would speak on it, but I think that just answered our question. We have massive landscape changing. These are beautiful landscapes, and we certainly don't
beautiful?
feature wind turbines. We're exporting a whole bunch of this energy, so it looks to me like we're kind of becoming a little bit of a dumping ground for other parts of the country. Also, the technology is changing so rapidly. I am speaking in support of this bill. Let's take a pause. DeepSeek coming out last Friday just changed the entire landscape in terms of energy requirements needed for these big AI centers. It is a really advisable thing to take a pause. I hope you guys will consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Any questions for Ms. Campbell? We appreciate you coming. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lucinda Houchins, and I'm from Wheatland.
How do you
And
do?
I was not thinking about talking about this, but there's one thing I think people should think about, and it is this, that everybody says all of the above, but they forget a very important word to put in there. All of the efficient and reliable sources of energy. I just think you kind of have to think more universally here. And I think a pause would be great till you figure this out. I kind of agree with her that things are changing pretty fast.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
I would be for this bill.
Thank you. And did you say your name was?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You said it. Is it Hodgkins?
No, it's Houchins, Houtche, N as in Nancy, S as in Sam. I was going to talk about 184, but I understand that's been moved till Wednesday. Is that correct?
We're just not going to have enough time today, ma'am. We're going
Okay, I
to,
can
we have
come
to
back.
be in 20 minutes. So,
That's fine.
Ms. Hodgkins, really good to have your testimony. Let's see if anybody has a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me talk.
You probably know Senator Steinmetz from over there.
I do. She knows my sister more.
All right, we appreciate your
Thank you.
testimony. Anybody else in the audience? Anybody else in the audience wish to address? How about like we go online?
Mr. Chairman, there's 3 people online. The first one is Devin Brubaker.
Mr. Brubaker. Chairman. Go ahead, Mr. Brubaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Devin Brubaker. I am the president of the Wyoming Airports Coalition. We stand opposed to this bill. A couple points that were made earlier today that I want to address. There's questions about out-of-state companies investing in Wyoming and about subsidies. And I want to be clear, Wyoming airports support all the above energy and our legacy industries. But if you look at the data, Wyoming coal companies, several of them are out-of-state companies, as well as subsidies that have been received by the coal industry dating back to 2004, and those seem to be all right. With that, Mr. Chairman, I did send an email last week to the committee regarding specific airport concerns. The Federal Aviation Administration requires airports to be self-sustaining as possible. We also are required to restrict the use of land adjacent to or in the immediate vicinity of the airport, and we have to use compatible land use for the lands around the airport. And oftentimes we're limited to things like agriculture and solar development, things that are low elevation development. This bill would take one of those opportunities away from our airports. And while we as airports do not have any current utility scale development occurring, there are multiple airports in the state that are in discussions for utility scale solar development on our lands, most of which is already behind a fence line that is restricted from wildlife access, that is restricted from public access and other uses. So passing this bill eliminates an opportunity for airports in the state to pursue revenue generation to help us come off the local taxpayer dime. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brubaker. You bring up good point. Questions for Mr. Brubaker? So if there was an exception in the bill for airport properties that are already fenced, would that be something you would support, I take it?
Mr. Chairman, excellent question. The Wyoming Airports Coalition would be thrilled with that amendment to this bill.
Sounds smart. Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Who's next?
Representative Alan Slagle's online now.
Former Representative Slagle, welcome. Good to see you. You're muted. You might have to turn on your microphone.
Oh, sorry about that.
Go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Case. I am for this moratorium. I guess I look at this thing and they talk about all the revenue this power generation is bringing into the state. But on the flip side, I say, at what cost? I mean, we see we've talked about, I've heard talk about federal subsidies earlier. Wyoming subsidizes wind energy as we give at least a 3-year moratorium on taxes for wind. And so, I mean, that's costing the state as well. It's the cost of our protected birds like our eagles, as was mentioned earlier. And I guess as I look at this, I agree that we need to slow down and take a look at it. It's also at the cost of our renewable energy sources, our coal and natural gas, because coal, natural gas energy production is reliable, efficient energy. Yeah, wind and solar are good when they're producing, if the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. But when the wind stops and the sun quits shining, we don't have any power. And then we need the reliable energy that Wyoming has been known for. And I think we need to continue to protect that. And I guess what I would say is, I mean, the last speaker talked about coal companies being out of state. I agree they're out of state owned, but 100% of the people are basically Wyoming people that come to work at the mines. Some of them commute from South Dakota and maybe Montana, but the majority of our workers in our coal industry is local. And so I just stand in support of this. I think it's time that we back off and take a closer look at what's happening with our wind and solar stuff before we just continue to crank it through the system. And thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions, I'd be willing to answer them.
Well, thank you very much. It's sure good to see you. Questions for former Representative Slagle? Any questions? We're sending you our best wishes. Good to see you.
Thank you. You guys have a good day.
You too. Who else? You said you had 3.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Bo down and on. Oh, so sorry, he's declined to. Oh, see if you can try to.
Oh,
do it
wait.
again.
Can you hear me?
We hear you, but we don't see you.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get on the video and I don't know why I can't figure out.
Well, if worse
Here,
comes to
now
worse, you can just give oral testimony.
He should be able to turn his video down now.
Try it again because I think we might have had you. There you are, sir. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, would you mind? I just personally hate the word chair. So if you call me chairman, and when Senator Steinmetz in her committee, you can call her Madam Chairwoman or whatever she wants to be called. So to you, sir.
Absolutely, Chairman Case. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. My name is Bo Downen. I'm the Director of Western State Affairs for the American Clean Power Association. I know that it's been a long morning, and so I'll be brief. I'd just like to say that I speak today in opposition of this bill. ACP is a national trade association representing utility scale clean energy developers in the space of solar, wind, and battery storage. And in Wyoming's case, there is a fabulous wind resource. It's also a great solar resource. That's the reason that developers want to be in Wyoming, is because just like the Powder River Basin is to coal, a lot of the state is to wind. It's a great resource that brings development to the state. There's been over $8 billion of investment brought to Wyoming. There's currently 600 plus associated jobs with the industry that are Wyoming jobs. We are working with Laramie County Community College on a wind tech program in order to train up oftentimes local Wyoming students on jobs that are in state so that they can stay home and have a good paying job in state. And so we just believe that this bill really halts development of any of these projects. It is truly choosing winners and losers by flat out banning an entire industry to participate in the market there in Wyoming. And we would just like to ask that the committee vote in opposition of this bill to continue to maintain the robust development of jobs and livelihood of Wyoming people there in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. Appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Downing? Not seeing any questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anybody else online?
No, Mr.
Anybody
Chairman.
else in the audience? I think we closed testimony. Committee, you've heard the testimony. What is your pleasure? Motion by Steinmetz, discussion. Are there any proposed amendments?